It's time to get your head out of your ass and start creating a life of no regrets. Whether you want to lose weight, get rich, or manifest a hot threesome on the beach, you're gonna want to turn this up. This is Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit with your host, best-selling author and professional butt kicker, Una Duncan.
Hello, Thembi. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Una. So excited.
I am so excited to see your face, dude. It's great. Okay, I'm going to jump right into it. I have so many questions for you. I was stalking you, by the way. Do you know that? I was stalking you and Googling you. And so I have a whole bunch of questions for you. But before we jump into that, I thought it would be good for the listeners to have a little bit of context. So I was wondering if you could take us back to prior to coming to Canada and you were living in Zimbabwe. What made you move?
Wow. It's been so long. Honestly, there were so many factors, but one of them was the economic situation in Zimbabwe wasn't that great. I just had come out of an abusive relationship, and there was the political situation wasn't great in Zimbabwe. People were being targeted. So I moved as a refugee in Canada. And that's basically my journey.
And can you tell the story about coming to Canada? I think that you got some assistance from someone on the plane to Canada.
Yes. It's such a funny story because, Una, the only reason I ended up in Montreal, and the only reason I went to Montreal is because the flight was passing through Paris. And in my mind, I thought that if you're passing through Paris, you get off the plane, you walk around the Eiffel Tower, and then you go back into the plane. I had never flown before. What did I know? So I went to Montreal, which was completely French. So I'm in the plane with this guy, and he's telling me, oh, so do you speak French? I'm like, no. He's like, Montreal is French. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, it's French. And then then I'm like, I don't even have any money. And he's like, how are you going to get from the airport to wherever you're going? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going. Just coming as a refugee. And this guy had $5 and he gave me his $5. And that's the money I arrived with in Canada. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, geez, Thembi, you got on a plane to a place that you had no idea about, not even what language was spoken, and no plan, no money, no nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this podcast, I want to talk about people with big goals and who have a lot of grit. Now that to me seems somewhere on the spectrum of grit to insane.
Well, I think I still am insane, but I didn't have an option, Una. Sometimes insanity comes from desperation. And I think most people, the reason why they don't take those type of crazy risks or insane risks is because they have too many options available to them. I didn't have any option. I had to make it work. I had to leave Zimbabwe. The political situation wasn't great. I had to leave Zimbabwe. I didn't have any money. And I had to find a place. And I was chosen to go to Canada. And I found myself on a plane to Canada. And I don't know if you know, but I left my daughter when she was 10 months old when I left. I didn't have an option. I didn't have a choice. So sometimes when you don't have a choice, you do insane things. And those insane things become the best things that could have ever happened to your life.
So you did it to improve your family's economic situation and to settle yourself in Canada and then go get your daughter.
Yes. And also the political situation. I do have to say that. That was during that time, people were just being kidnapped from their houses because you didn't support the government at that time. So there was also very instability. People were dying, people were being killed. So there was that option of like, I can't continue staying here. I have to get out and I have to help my family to get out as well.
Right. So as terrifying as the prospect of going to a country you had no idea about with no money, it was worse to stay where you were.
Yeah. I like to say, what's the worst that could happen? I honestly looked at that and was like, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, reading from history, and there was no Google. Well, it was there, but I didn't know about it. It seemed like, what is the worst that could happen? I'm just going to get there. If I have a return ticket, if it doesn't work out, I'll come back.
Okay. So what did happen? You landed in Montreal with $5 and then?
Yep. And then I landed on December 1st. If you've never been to Canada, December 1st is not a time to go to Montreal, just so you know. So I lived at December 1st, Una, and it was freezing. It was cold. And I had literally like a sweater in terms of a jacket. It's like a spring sweater. And I get there and I kind of told them my story. They knew what was happening in Zimbabwe. So everybody who was coming from Zimbabwe was automatically classified as a refugee. And we had to go to the YMCA. But I didn't have money. I had $5, and the taxi was like $30 to go to the YMCA. So I met other Zimbabweans at the airport, and one of them had money. So I gave him my only $5, and like, this is all I have. And we combined it together, and basically we went to YMCA. So I stayed at YMCA for about 30 days until I got a permit to work, and I started working.
What did you do?
My first job was at a car wash.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I met this lady at YMCA, and this lady said, Thembi, the car washes in Canada are classy. You got to work at a car wash. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. And so she convinced me that we had to put on makeup, we had to wear stilettos.
What?
And we went to this car wash place. And I'm like, we get there, these guys were wearing overalls and boots, and we're in stilettos. And then I remember we're trying to clean cars in stilettos. It was so weird. And finally, I don't know if she had seen this. She must have seen it in a movie somewhere. So anyway,
awesome.
Yeah, we washed the stilettos and we went all day. And the guy gave us $5. The train at that time was $2.50 with the bus to go from where we stayed to this LaSalle place. So literally, we worked all day for the bus fare. And it was like, I never went back. And then I got another job to fold socks. And then I got a telemarketing job. I think that's what taught me to sell anything. I quit that job right away, actually. And I went to work at a nursing home. And this lady said to me, there's always angels on our path. And people say things. And sometimes you don't realize that that's the next step to your life. And this woman said to me, I was like a nursing attendant, like cleaning people. And she says to me, you need to go to school. You're very smart. You need to go to school. And I was like, really? How do I go to school? Like, I just came to Canada. Like, how do I do that? And she's like, go to this college and just apply and just see. And I am so glad I listened to this woman. She was of African origin. I don't know where from. And she was a nurse working at the hospital. And I went to the school and I applied and boom, I got in. And so 8 months later, I started training to be a nurse.
Oh, that's wonderful. That must have been, it felt so good at the time.
It felt so good at the time. Yeah. It felt so good at the time. And then so I graduated from nursing. And then I was in Montreal. I couldn't speak French. So I really struggled fitting in the hospital without speaking French. So I ended up moving to Edmonton. And I remember the first 2 days, Una, I realized like I was working with these women who were older than me. I mean, I was still young, I was in my 20s. And these women are older than me and they're limping to work. And I'm like, and then I remember they were talking about retirement and everything. And then they were saying, like one of them was calculating her retirement and she was going to make $2,100 a month after retiring. And I remember my first paycheck as a nurse was $1,800. So I was like, oh my goodness. So I'm going to go from $1,800 in 2 weeks. That was in 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. From $1,800 to $2,100 a month once I retire. This doesn't seem fair. I'm like, I can't work for 40 years just for $2,100. So I started researching and I came across a newspaper ad and it said, invest in real estate, get out of the rat race, invest in real estate. It was on the Edmonton Sun. And I attended that event. I went and bought the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I started learning everything I could learn about real estate. I started investing in real estate, buying properties, and learning how can I buy properties with no money. Like, I was like, I need to get out of nursing. So at first my goal was to buy one property. Because I told myself, if I buy one property paid off, at least I will have $1,800 coming from that property. So I literally bought a property which was renting for $1,800 because my goal was like, okay, I'll have $1,800 plus this $2,100 I'm getting from my retirement. That's going to be enough to survive my retirement. That was my plan.
That was the plan. Okay.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
And then once you get into real estate, especially if you get into these real estate clubs and everybody's saying, I've got 100 properties, I've got 50 properties, I've got million properties. You're like, oh, I got to catch up. So once I got into the real estate thing, I just started learning more and just investing in real estate. And that's kind of how my journey went. And from real estate, you get to a stage when you're improving yourself. You get to a stage where you're like, you know what, I feel like I've acquired enough personally, and now I want to give back. And that's the stage I got to where I was like, I just need to help other people realize how you can invest in real estate with no money. Like I came to Canada with $5. So I'm like, I need to teach other people. And that's really where I went into the journey of learning how to teach other people how to invest in real estate and meet the amazing owner along the way.
Thembi, I feel like the leap between you working as a nurse in Montreal and then in Edmonton and then doing the math of looking about how much you were set to retire with and thinking, well, that looks like some bullshit. And then you were like, well, that's it. I'll just go and invest in real estate. And you saw an article in the Edmonton Sun said invest in real estate with no money down. Now, let me tell you something. Like everyone sees that article and very few people create a massive real estate portfolio after seeing that article. And especially a lot of people have thoughts like, yeah, but I don't have enough money. I don't have the credit score. I don't have the, it's too risky. I'm a single mom. You were a single mom at this time. Your daughter was with you. So what do you think enabled you to make this massive leap that, most people don't? Was it the same sort of thing? Like that the alternative was so unacceptable. You're like, $2,100 a month is not going to cut it for Thembi.
Yeah, I think when you see the pain point or the other side of something, you realize that this is not what I want. I remember, as I'm saying, this lady, I can still picture her limping to work. I think she had a knee surgery or something like that. And she was coming to work so that she can finish her few extra years and get retirement. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm doing this. Like, you just have to, I think you have to dream bigger than what you see in your everyday life. Like when you're seeing somebody like that at work, who seems to be suffering. I mean, I'm sure she was happy. She was happy being a nurse. Nursing is a great job, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't something I was going to do for the rest of my life. I remember like the first month when I was working in Edmonton, my boss bought me a sticker that said, I love nursing. Not because I loved it, but she was making fun of me because I complained every day. Every day I used to say, I can't believe how people do this. I can't believe how people do this. This is not what I thought nursing was. Like the moment I graduated, I realized I did not go to school to wipe people's bums, no offense. I did not go to school to look at people's everything. I thought nursing was about giving pills. So it was kind of a shock for me that I had to touch somebody's private parts and clean them up. And so,
surprise.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what I enjoyed, Una. I like talking to people. My ideal job would have been to just talk to people and give them pills. That's it. But I couldn't do that. So it was one of those things where like the pain and the risk was the worst that could happen. Like, even if I try this and it doesn't work, what's the worst that could happen? At least I have a job to back, a nursing job, to back me up. But I think a lot of people just get stuck in the pain because they don't think there's a better way.
Yeah. And when you were like, there's a better way, was it because you joined these groups and you saw people who were doing it and then or did you always believe I can do this?
No, I joined this group. I read an article. Catherine Brooker was her name. She was a former nurse who had retired and had 37 properties at that time or something like that when I met her. And I was like, you know what? If she can do it, I can do it. She is a story that inspired me so much,
Right. And then having had that, then that's what made you want to inspire others. And so you started teaching other people to invest in real estate with no money down. And am I right in thinking that you focused on women? Is that true, Thembi? Or was it really just anyone?
Yes. Yes, it was women. One of the things when I left Zimbabwe in the plane, one thing I didn't tell you is I wrote the words pause. I was bitter at that time, Una, because I had just come out of this relationship and I knew the abuse that was in Zimbabwe for women. And PODS stood for Prominent Association of Widows, Divorcees, and Spinsters. So I was going to start this big company called PODS, where I was going to empower these widows, divorcees, and spinsters. It basically was a singles club. and so that was my goal. And I mean, this was a 21-year-old me, by the way, writing this down. So please don't judge me.
I'm not. I'm thinking that's a beautiful and amazing goal for a 21-year-old on a plane to Canada have. Yeah.
Canada. Yeah. So anyways, eventually what happened is when I got this, I was like, you know what? I want to empower women. I always had this goal to empower women. But I didn't know how. Actually, what I did with my real estate profits, what I used to do is I used to build wells. I used to build wells in Zimbabwe, in remote areas. But it was a very slow progression of helping people. And I was like, I'm not gonna do much. It's gonna take me forever to empower women. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll teach them how to invest in real estate. And actually, my focus was in Africa. I was like, I'm going to teach women in Africa how to invest in real estate. So I started doing that. And with that, I also started realizing that the discrepancies which I left 20 or however many years ago were still there, because these women didn't even believe in themselves. They didn't even have the belief to invest in real estate. At the end of the day, actually, my class, I remember it was majority men instead of women. The class for the real estate investing ended up attracting more men than women. So that was a bit of an issue. I was like, oh, that's a bit weird. So I kind of tried that. And then I hired a virtual assistant. And I trained a virtual assistant in Kenya. And I trained this guy, and he was so good. So when I went to Zimbabwe in 2017, still doing the real estate thing, I started realizing that, this real estate thing is not really working very well. Maybe I could teach them how to be virtual assistants. So that's kind of how I transitioned from the whole real estate. I said, at least teaching them how to be virtual assistants, they'll get jobs. Those jobs will help them build the confidence, and then they can start investing later on. But trying to take somebody from an abusive relationship who has nothing straight to buying a house is a big step. And that's something I didn't realize at first. Yeah.
Okay. So can I just for clarity, so you're doing really well with investing in Canada. You started a real estate education company to try and get people to invest in, teach other people how to invest in real estate with no money down. And then you thought, well, who I'm really passionate about empowering are women, specifically in Zimbabwe, in abusive relationships. So let me go and try and get them to invest in real estate. So you went back to Zimbabwe with your real estate education company, and you found that it mostly attracted men, that the women there were not ready for that big step. And then you hired a virtual assistant, and then you thought, oh, maybe this is the better interim step. Is that right?
Yes. Yes and no. I didn't physically go back to Zimbabwe. I was just doing, and actually I wasn't just targeting Zimbabwe. I was targeting African women.
Got it.
So I was just doing this virtual online, and most of my students became male South African guys. I was like, okay, this is not what I was hoping to attract. But then what happened during the process, one of my students ended up being my virtual assistant. And that was an easier process. And I realized that's an easier leap. And when I went to Zimbabwe in 2017, I started realizing that what I was trying to do, and when I met and heard the stories and just started seeing in newspapers some stories, I realized that what I was trying to do was a bit of a big leap. Maybe I could just teach them how to be virtual assistants. That's easy. Anybody can do that. And that's kind of how I got into that.
And so now you have an agency that trains African women to be virtual assistants specifically for digital marketers. Do I have that right?
We actually have expanded. Instead of doing just women in Africa, we've actually expanded to also men, because we started also realizing that the abuse was kind of two ways, in the sense that some men didn't have role models to show them how to be better people. And because they were so frustrated, they didn't get jobs and everything. So it was just, we said, you know what, let's just help everybody. So it's basically now globally, even though we concentrate mainly on women, our company is 90% women. We do have some men who work with us, those rare individuals who are amazing men who work with us. And we basically are a funnels agency now.
Amazing. Can you just quickly explain for non-digital marketers who are listening to this what a funnel is?
Oh, yes. Oh, I forget. Yeah. So what a funnel is, it's basically a customer journey. It's, when somebody comes to your website and they are looking for something, the funnel is basically the journey of the person from the time they arrive at your doorstep. And by doorstep, I mean website, at your doorstep, to the time they buy your product. So we build that journey for you and structuring it and strategize to say, this is what's going to help this person, instead of just leaving at the door, to go in and finally make a purchase and be your raving client. So when you go to a website, sometimes you'll see something that says enter your name and email address. We actually are the one responsible for that. So, and then all of a sudden you're getting an email. That's us. We are building all that at the back end.
Magic.
The tech stuff. Yeah. It's magically. The tech stuff that happens when you get those emails, that's us. So we help people do that.
I love that. Thembi, on your site, some of the people who are profiled as potential VAs and digital marketing assistants are really highly educated. Like, you have people who have MBAs and law degrees and engineering degrees. And you said that even with these really, advanced education, a lot of them did not have the confidence to seek out these kind of positions.
Yeah, it was very interesting. These people, they were doctors, they are lawyers, they're engineers, but still, because they've been in these environments where they are women, they don't know anything, women don't know anything, women are not smart enough. And I'm saying this in quotation marks because that's not true. But things like that, they've been told these things over and over again. These are things that are ingrained in us. And when we grow up, those things that are ingrained in us, sometimes it's just so hard to take them out. You're talking about woo shit. This is like some woo shit. This is some woo shit. Like, that's why people need therapy sometimes. Because you grow up with being told you're not enough. A PhD is not going to take that away from you. Some people go to school, actually get an extra PhD so that they can try to prove that they're enough, and then they realize, still, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
You just have to work on yourself. You just have to have healing and inner therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've certainly seen that, for example, in the fitness industry, I used to mentor emerging fitness professionals, and they were always like, I'm not fit enough. I need to get another certification, and I'm like, no, man, you just need to get out there and start helping people. That's the only way you're going to feel qualified, is just by doing it. But Thembi, how did you have the confidence? Because you grew up in that same environment. What is it? And you have been, and you came to Canada and you were in a specific environment. And then you, in every situation, you have risen above what the usual standard is. What do you think it is about you that's able to do that?
A couple of things. Definitely not about me, but I think the first one is mentors. I think people don't seek out mentorship enough. I think we try to convince ourselves we can do things, but I think what a mentor does, a mentor believes in you before you can even believe in yourself. A mentor pushes you to the extreme, and he or she makes you think that you can do things which you don't even think you can do. And so I think there's really power in mentorship, and I know there's power in mentorship, and I think people don't seek mentorship enough. So I had mentors along the way, and some mentors came from my teachers from nursing school who would tell me, you're so brilliant, you can do this. Or from real estate, or from any other community. Like, every time I go to something, I think the first thing I do is I seek a mentor, and that really has helped me. And be in a community of people. Surround yourself with people who are just positive dreamers, who are seeing better than you. Because if I go to my mom and tell her, Mom, I'm going to make $1 million next year or this year, she'll look at me and like, are you crazy? No. But if I'm surrounded by people who are like me, they'll be like, oh no, that's too low, Thembi. You should shot higher, and things like that. So that's really one of the things you people don't do. They don't surround themselves with the mental enough. And the other thing is people don't work on themselves. And I think you have to work on yourself a lot. One of the ways you work on yourself is by doing some routines in the morning, meditation, write down your goals. Una, every year, and I'm sure as long as you've known me, every year I have a vision board of a skinny girl. Because I'm like, I'm going to be skinny. It hasn't happened. Something I'm not doing right in the weight department. Because, every morning when I open my computer, my vision board is my screen cover. I look at that vision board and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. And I am practicing my brain and making my brain realize these are things that I have to do. I have no option. I listen to a podcast with my headphones on every morning, podcasts like this, podcasts that are about people who are sharing their stories. And I just keep going and I just keep going and I just keep going. And I think people don't do that enough. People don't invest in themselves. You can't grow using the same mindset you had a year ago. Mm-hmm. You have to work on yourself.
Yeah. And, Thembi, as long as I've known you, you have been just so rigorous with training your brain to be the kind of person that will accomplish the stuff that you want to accomplish, which is you've got massive goals. And by the way, another time I'm going to get you back on the podcast because I would love to delve into why you might be able to accomplish everything on your vision board and the skinny girl thing hasn't happened yet, because I really do think there are transferable skills there. But anyway, we won't touch that today. But I wanted to ask you about the woo-woo mindset stuff and the vision board, because I feel like one of the biggest criticisms of woo-woo mindset, personal development is this idea that so people in developing countries in horrible situations just don't have a strong enough mindset. What do you say about that?
That's a very interesting thing. In North America, there are people who are homeless and there are people who are billionaires. In Africa, I'm in South Africa right now as we're recording this. I have seen people who have so much money, they don't even know what to do about it. And I've seen people who have nothing at all. I remember a story where two guys who grew up in the same household, and they were interviewed, and the other one was wealthy, filthy rich, and the other one was on the street picking bags. And they were interviewed, and the interviewer asked the same questions to this person. And says, the first one, the rich guy, is like, how did you become who you are? And the guy says, I had no option. I grew up homeless. I had nowhere to stay. I had to work hard and change my life and improve my situation. I was like, okay. And then they asked the second guy, the guy on the street, so how did you become who you are? How did you end up like this? It's like, I had no option. I was born on the street. I had nowhere to go. I was homeless. What did you expect of me? I had no option. This is how I become what. And I think there is a mix in Africa and anywhere else. Your environment and your upbringing has very little to do with where you are. Because I can tell you, I grew up walking 10 kilometers to school, and there's people I grew up walking with who are selling tomatoes on the street. And after staying in Africa and living in Africa, I do believe it's mindset. A lot of people do not change their mindset and they don't up-level their mindset. They just switch into the blame level. I've seen this even in the women I train. The ones who have succeeded, the VAs, when I was training the VAs, the ones who succeeded are the ones who didn't have the victim mindset. They just went out there, they attracted whatever was positive to them. They said, I am going to be the best. I want to be your case study. I'm going to be one of the best. I'm going to work for you. I'm going to be your CEO. I had one of the girls who told me she's going to be my CEO. She's still with me right now. She's not a CEO yet, but she is still with me right now. And the ones who were like, I'm just going to show up to work, finish my job and go home. Some of them don't even work with us. And some of them are back in the streets selling tomatoes. So it definitely is about the mindset, whether you're in Africa or you're in North America.
I wanted to ask you, I saw something you were quoted online. I'm going to read it back to you and I want to ask you a question about it. You said, growing up in Zimbabwe, the charity organizations I always saw seemed to support women weaving, herding cattle, and sewing clothes. My dreams were bigger than getting a new goat or a bag of beans. I dreamt of owning a business, flying to America, and changing the future for African women. When I found myself a third wife, my dreams didn't stop. I just wanted to change the future for women in Africa. 6 months ago, I took what seems like an impossible journey. I collected laptops from friends in Canada and started teaching women in Zimbabwe to work online, create websites online, and earn income in the currency they choose. What if our next Bill Gates came from a woman in an African village? It's possible. 80 women, some who have never used laptops in their lives, are now coding, creating websites, and working on apps. So the first thing, Thembi, when I read that, it's just like your vision is so freaking clear. Like I can tell you're like picturing it and you're picturing the next Bill Gates coming out of a woman in an African village. And I love the clarity of your vision. And I love that it's so much bigger. And the second thing I wanted to ask is, do you think that image that you got from the charities of the Zimbabwean woman with the goat, did you find it patronizing? You know, when you were growing up with those charities, did you feel like they're trying to keep us small?
I'll give you an example, Ona. You're not going to teach your son, or you've got two handsome boys, you're not going to teach them how to have a goat and start a goating business. Mm-hmm. But then you go to Africa, you decide that you see a little boy, and you decide that boy, I can give him a goat and that's going to change his life. And I'm not saying that doesn't change people's lives. It does change people's lives. But your son, you're probably thinking of teaching him how to code and how to start a business and how to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And you're buying him a laptop or something so that he could design something. So I think there's a miss there. Like, I think this idea that you're empowering people by giving them things that you wouldn't even do for your own children, I think there's something wrong there. I think there's something wrong there. I appreciate what people are doing, and I think it's great, but why can't you teach them how to be like you? If you really want to help, why don't you teach them how to be like you?
Well, what about, I'm just going to push back a little bit. When you went to Africa and you said, hey, ladies, let's invest in real estate like I did. You were trying to teach them to be like you, and they were not ready yet.
Yes, I agree. But at the same time, Una, when I'm going to goating and knitting and all that stuff, that's a little bit way behind. It's funny because I actually have a family member who once said this, like, oh, I want to take blah, blah, blah and take them to a school so that they can learn how to do cutting and designing, which is basically sewing. I'm like, what is he going to do with sewing? Like, what can you do with sewing? You know, I'm not saying people should stop absolutely if that's what you can do. And also, I think it's important as you're giving, make sure you're not just giving, you're teaching. You're empowering, because this idea of just giving and giving and giving, I think that's why Africa is still struggling. That's why the government is relaxed in Africa, because they're waiting for the Western world to save them. They're waiting for the IMF to give them a loan. They're not being initiative or self-initiative because they know that we're going to be saved. We have hunger, we just tell the United Nations, you know. So...
that actually brings me to my next question. I wanted to ask about your mission. And when you Google your mission is all over the internet. So can you tell us what your specific mission is?
Empower 1 million women by 2025 right now. I have been challenged to increase that number.
You're thinking so small. I don't know.
That's what I was told.
Level up, Thembi.
1 million women by 2025. You know, Una, it feels like when I did this goal, it was in 2019. And I thought, oh yeah, that's going to be like an easy peasy and lemon squeezy. Well, 3 years later, I have met so many challenges, but it's like, I feel like now I'm ready. I'm ready to take over Africa, and I will.
Oh, I believe you. So specifically, how will you know whether a woman has been empowered?
Like, we're not just teaching them or saying be employees. We want them to be entrepreneurs. So whether it's working with me or whether it's working online for somebody, have they managed to at least earn some income so that they can be independent? Because I think what really empowerment is also is like, am I self-sufficient enough? Because if they're not self-sufficient, they're not really empowered. Yeah. I want to share something, Julie. You know Julie Helmrich? We both know Julie Helmrich. She once said to me, one time my staff went on strike. And Julie said to me, oh my goodness, you have empowered them so much they now go on strike. So that's another way they go on strike. That's empowerment.
It is. That's true. And it's true because you do say, your mission is to empower 1 million women by 2025 so that
money is never a reason they're stuck in an abusive relationship. At first, when I started, I thought I could do this by myself. And I have learned that if I'm gonna go further, I have to go with somebody. So I have done some partnerships, and I am working on more partnerships, and being on podcasts and sharing about their story, trying to get them to as many platforms as I can, and sharing the message. Yeah.
That's awesome. And of course, we want everyone to go to digitalmarketingondemand.io to hire one of Thembi's amazing staff. And, Thembi, right now in the business community, I am hearing, I don't know if you are too, a lot of like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, the recession's coming, people aren't opening emails anymore, blah, 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 blah. We're going to lose all our customers. Having been through so many obstacles already, are you like, recession? I laugh in the face of a recession. Bring it on. Do you feel more resilient than some of your North American counterparts?
I don't know if I would say I'm more resilient than some of my North American. I think if there is a recession, it's going to affect a lot of people, but it's going to affect us in different ways. It could affect us for the positive, or it could affect us for the negative. I love to read businesses which were started during recession. Airbnb, that's my favorite story of all time. They started because they were broke. They couldn't afford to pay rent. They needed something to pay rent during the 2008 recession. And that's how Airbnb was started. And so to me, I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, this is a great opportunity, because guess what? This is what's going to happen. And I'm looking at it in my business, for example, because my goal is to connect, one of the goals is to connect talent with global opportunity. And I'm like, that's great. Our talent is affordable. There's opportunity in the world. Well, you don't have to hire expensive talent anymore. You can just come to us. So I just see growth. Honestly, I feel like this is like the start of an Airbnb for me.
I love this. And I want to point out the pattern here that when faced with a potential obstacle, what you've done is you are thinking, how could this be an opportunity? You've also found the mentor, right? You've identified a mentor in Airbnb. You're like, actually, they did it, so I can do it. And you're like, okay, and also let's find out how we can do this and why this is an opportunity.
Yeah. So everybody who's faced, look at what you're doing right now and think, how can I make this an opportunity? Everybody's going to be stressed about recession. They're going to be eating like crazy, Una. For you, your business is going to skyrocket. like everybody,
Okay, I just have a couple more questions. Thembi, can you tell us, your mindset and your attitude is obviously been a huge contributor to what you've accomplished. You mentioned that you have your vision board on your screensaver on your computer. Can you tell us about any other daily practices that you do in order to stay in shape as far as your mental and your mindset and your attitude?
Yeah. Gratitude journal. I have a gratitude journal every morning. I wake up and I write in my gratitude the things I'm grateful for. I've realized that whatever you are grateful for, appreciate. So I'm always grateful for abundance, grateful for a lot of money, grateful for my family, for my health. And so because I know that's going to appreciate whatever. I read the Bible now. I never used to. I now read the Bible. I read about a chapter or two every morning. I actually started reading from Genesis, and I'm now on Deuteronomy. And so that really it's been interesting for me. And this is not for religious purposes, please, for anybody who's listening thinking, oh my gosh, she's now teaching us how to be Christians. But no, this is even for your mindset, because you start listening to these stories about the people who went through this journey, and you're like, oh my goodness, and they survived, and they did this, and they did that, and you start relating. It's just so connected to the business. And it's like, it sounds like my business. It sounds like my business. So I started doing that. It's been a great part of my morning routine. And I used to walk a lot, and then I got sick, so I stopped. But walking and listening to a podcast every morning is also a big thing for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be restarting my walking routine every morning, because that's just amazing. It's amazing what you can think of, the ideas that come when you're walking in nature.
Absolutely. And speaking of podcasts, I know that you have a podcast, and I know that everyone who listens to this is going to be obsessed with you. So can you tell us how we can follow your journey to empower 1 million women by 2025 so that no one ever has to stay in an abusive relationship again, and how we can support you and where people can connect with you?
Thank you, Una, for that. Yeah, so people can go to listen to She Breaks Through. The through is THRU, because somebody took my domain. So shebreaksthrough.com. And you can just go there and listen to the podcast. Right now, it's a solo podcast. It's just me sharing some ideas. But starting in January, we're bringing in guests. So you'll also meet some guests like Una, and an amazing guest sharing their stories and their journey. So shebreaksthrough.com, that's the best way to really get in touch. We've got some freebies which we share in there, and quite a lot of stuff.
Amazing. Thembi, thank you so much for doing this with me.
And thank you so much, Una, for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, bye. Okay, dude, did you love Thembi or what? So I don't normally do an epilogue to interviews, but remember that part where Thembi says that the one thing on her vision board that hasn't happened is becoming a skinny girl? So after the interview, I reached out to Thembi with my thoughts on that, and she said it would be okay if I shared them with you. So here's the deal. People don't change unless the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of changing. That's a quote from Tony Robbins. So in Thembi's case, we can see that time and again, she made massive leaps forward when the alternative became absolutely unacceptable. The pain of staying in Zimbabwe was so great. People getting kidnapped, being the third wife to an abusive husband. It was so bad that the alternative of getting on a plane and leaving her family to go to a country she knew nothing about with no money and no plan, that was less painful. When she went from being a nurse to being a real estate mogul, it's because to her, the pain of thinking that she would spend her life wiping bums as a nurse to retire with $2,100 a month was unacceptable. And she took a giant leap to invest in real estate with no money down. So I think the reason that Thembi hasn't become a skinny girl, in her words, is not because she can't, or because there's something wrong with her discipline or motivation. I mean, God, we have seen that that is not true. It's because her current physical condition, it might be like a low-grade bother to her, but it's not unacceptable. She doesn't hate it the way she hated her situation in Zimbabwe or her financial prospects as a nurse. In this case, the pain of changing, of doing all the work to become a skinny girl, is greater than the pain of the low-grade annoyance of being in the shape that she's currently in. And when that is the case, and that might be the case for you, lovely listener, my advice is to just take the skinny girl off your vision board. It's not going to happen if you don't want it badly enough to go through the grit to make it happen. And it's just going to buzz in your brain like some unchecked item on your to-do list, and it's going to drive you insane. Instead, your efforts would be better spent cultivating love and acceptance for your body exactly as it is, and drive energy towards your other awesome goals, like the ones that burn so bright for you that the alternative is unacceptable. Maybe for you, it's cultivating an awesome relationship with your kids. Or maybe it's making a go of your new business so you can be financially independent. For Thembi, it's empowering 1 million women by 2025. You can hear it when she talks, that is going to happen. Thank you so much for tuning in. And listen, if you like this content, let me know by subscribing and leaving a review. Bye for now. Hey, dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.